Welcome everyone to the Beyond Gas team webinar to share with you the Pipeline and Water Protection Act, which is a new bill in Maryland. And I'd like to introduce you to our presenters tonight. You'll be hearing from Caitlin Schmidt, who's with Waterkeepers Chesapeake and began the drafting of this bill that we'll discuss tonight. You'll also be hearing from Brent Walls, who's the Upper Potomac River Keeper, and he has been involved from the beginning. Actually, one of the first calls that I ever heard about a 401 water certification through the Federal Clean Water Act was on a call with Brent a few summers ago when we first heard about the proposal for the Potomac Pipeline project. And then after that, Zach Gertis, who's on staff with Maryland Sierra Club, and Ruth Alice White, who is a co-chair with me on the Beyond Gas team, will be talking about ways in which you can become involved as volunteers. And I guess we need to be sure that Caitlin's on. We have Caitlin? Caitlin, if you're on, be sure you're not muted. And if Caitlin is not on, then I think what we'll do is start with Brent, and then we can circle back to Caitlin when she's able to join us. Is that okay with you, Brent?
Oh, yeah, that's fine with me.
Okay, so I'm going to go through the slides that Caitlin would be talking about and start here for Brent.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you. Welcome, everyone. So I'd like to begin by saying my name is Brent Walls, Upper Potomac River Keeper. I've been working on this Potomac pipeline for the last couple of years. You know, there's a couple of different things about pipelines that we had issues with this particular one. And I guess most people have issues with all pipelines when it's, you know, the construction and the operation. During the construction process, there's a number of different issues that we have concerns. One of the really large mounting issues is the use of hydraulic directional drilling, which can be tunneled under large stretches, under roads, under rivers. And that uses a large amount of toxic drilling chemicals and mud for that drill bit to go into and through the geology. And one of the big worries is drilling blowout, where that massive amount of drilling toxic chemicals can breach the surface and cause significant pollution issues. You know, and then there's during the construction process, there's a lot of erosion and sediment control issues that can inundate and degrade local streams. And then we have during the operation. And during the operation of the actual pipeline, once it's constructed, there's a number of issues that we'll kind of go through a little bit briefly tonight. And that's gas leaks are of focus. And then there's explosive issues from these pipelines and the safety hazards that imposes nearby residents and other structures. And we're going to particularly focus on the Potomac pipeline and some karst geology. If you can go to the next slide. So just a real quick on karst geology and what it is. Karst geology is a limestone type of geology, and it is highly dissolvable with water. So after rain events and that kind of thing, it can create sinkholes and caverns. And really that water can easily transmit from the surface into the ground media. And the problem with that is that most other geologies have a filtering mechanism that can filter out pollutants. But in karst geology, that filtering mechanism is not there. So you can see in the picture where you have a number of different caverns in the ground, large voids. Sinkholes are a number of issues with karst geology. And you can think of Florida. Florida has a ton of sinkholes, and we've seen sinkholes in Maryland also. And we have a high area of karst geology. Can we go to the next slide, please? we have a significant amount of karst geology in this area that we're really concerned with. And so that karst geology is highly focused in Berkeley County, Jefferson County, West Virginia, Frederick, and Washington County, Maryland. And as you can see on the map here, the blue is the karst limestone area that we're concerned with. And also we've overlaid a recent mapping of the pipelines, gas pipelines in the area. And I'm not sure if you can all see this, but the pipeline companies do their darndest to avoid karst geology. They know that there are problems with karst geology, and they know that they have to go through significant hoops to make sure that the pipelines are protected, and that doesn't always necessarily work. And so you can see by this map that they've done their darndest to avoid karst geology areas. There's only a few large pipelines that have crossed karst geology. Next slide.
Do you see it?
No, I don't see it.
Causes of gas pipeline failures.
That or my, no, I don't see it on my computer. Is anyone else? Oh, wait, I see. Okay, yes. So, and here's a pie chart from the Journal of Petroleum and Engineering, and it has looked at the data for a significant period of time, and it's showing that you know, the percentages of failures for pipelines, and a big one is corrosion, and then we also have the weld failure, and those are the two really important ones because those are you know, human induced, and then we also have excavation damage too. That's high up there on the list. But this just shows you that there are a number of hazards and potentials. And when you have pipelines in karst geology, and you have excessive amounts of rain water flowing through that geology, creating holes and caverns, corrosion can persist quite readily. And then you have the pipeline welds that can also fail, and especially in karst geology where you have sinkholes and caverns that can easily form, which will put a lot of pressure on those welds and those seams, which can cause leaks. Can we go next slide? And you know, also along with this, the erosion with pipelines is very significant. We have a lot of steep grades in the Potomac watershed, along with other areas in the other pipelines like Mountain Valley and Atlantic Coast Pipeline. And here's an interesting, oh, you can go back to the other one. I like
That one.
where the karst geology is. Yeah, there you go. So this is an example of how high erosion placement of where the pipeline is in karst geology. You can see where the arrow is pointing to a sinkhole. And then you can see further down slope where there's the water supply in the spring and then the water treatment plant. And this is an example of how pipelines can corrode, leak, find its way through a sinkhole in karst geology, wind up in a water supply, and then wind up in the wastewater treatment or the water treatment plant for drinking water. So, and then as you see that even further down gradient is the public school. So this is one of our main worries on the Potomac pipeline in this area. Next slide. And so the number of incidences that have been occurring over the years, it's not necessarily old pipelines. We have a number of new pipelines that are also having problems with corrosion, leaks, and explosions. And here's a number of incidents that have occurred. And as you can see, as we've grown in increasing use of pipelines, and we've had a number of increases lately in pipeline incidences. The more pipelines we build, it seems like the more, I mean, you can just Google pipeline issues and you can see a number of explosions, leaks, and whatnot in recent years. And this is just a chart that's kind of showing that increase in incidences over the years. So next slide. Pipeline explosions are probably one of the more concerning issues to the public. They see a pipeline, they see the explosion. It's you never know when it's going to happen. It's like I said before, new and old pipelines, not just old pipelines. And so there's an example of one recent pipeline explosion. Oh, I guess not so recent, but this is on Interstate 70. This is from the same manufacturer company that is proposed to put in the Potomac pipeline. Next slide, please. And here's the aftermath of a very large explosion of this year. So this is very recent. It's you know, there's at least 2 or 3 explosions that I can think of each year, and we're already starting out this year with this significant one. Next slide, please. So here in September 2018, this pipeline also occurred up in Pennsylvania. It was a massive pipeline explosion, and it was just recently placed into operation. And so again, an example of how it's the claims from the gas company that it's, you know, mostly your old pipelines and not the new pipelines, and they're all very safe and nothing is ever wrong with them. And this just kind of proves them wrong, that there are problems with new pipelines. Next slide. And so here, coming home, here's in West Virginia, this is the Mountaineer gas pipeline that has been put in, that would be a part of the Potomac pipe, or part of the Potomac pipeline that TransCanada is trying to get through Maryland. And you can see how the pipeline has been put in right between 2 homes in a highly residential area. And so not more than 30 feet from a house, and you have a pipeline that's running under high pressure that could potentially explode. This is going through karst geology. And so if we have any caverns that seem to open up below it, sinkholes, and corrosion issues on the pipeline, you know, we're going to have some significant problems, and these people are going to be in that threat zone. And so this really brings it home. And then not only is there a problem with that potential hazard for explosions, but we also have a problem in karst geology with these pipelines leaking. And when they leak in a karst geology, since there's no, since the air voids in karst geology are quite significant, gas can travel great distances through karst geology and can be then private wells in the area could be susceptible to methane leaks, and then you've seen the sinks catching on fire up in Pennsylvania and out in West Virginia, and that's exactly what could happen. So then we have not only pipeline explosion problems, but we also have groundwater flow contamination, private drinking water sources contaminated. Next slide.
And while you're waiting for that slide to come up, Brent, Caitlin, I think, is on now. So I might look for a natural pausing point and we can go back.
Okay, great.
But go ahead.
Yeah, I'm gonna just discuss these next two slides, and then we can go from there to Caitlin's. Okay. All right. So so for the past 2 years, we, and I'm sure many of you have been involved in our No Potomac Pipeline campaign, where we set out to try and stop this pipeline. And we had a number of events in the last couple of years, from on the water press conferences to Hands Across the Potomac, where we had over 300 people join. And we've also had a number of events in Annapolis where we surrounded the governor's mansion. And so we've really worked hard at trying to get the public involved, local county commissioners, local town councils, and we have been heard, especially since the Maryland Board of Public Works has denied an easement for TransCanada. But in the very beginning of this entire process, we were under a false delusion of who our focused person of influence would be. Our focus was the governor, Governor Hogan. And the reason why we were focused on Governor Hogan is because he has the ability to communicate with his Maryland Department of the Environment and push for a full 401 certification review process. And we were had a meeting with MDE, and they kind of blindsided us. They told us that, yes, we're going to do a review. Yes, we're going to look at all the impacts, but they failed to let us know that they have already waived the right to do a full 401 certification. And so a lot of our efforts were going on false hopes and talking to the governor when MDE has already waived its 401 certification process. Next slide. And this is important. This was important to us because what we were trying to do was we were trying to get the Maryland Department of the Environment to we go into the next slide. So what we were trying to do is we were trying to get the Maryland Department of the Environment to exercise its authority under the 401 certification to push FERC, to push FERC to require a full environmental assessment that not only incorporated the 3.4 miles of pipeline crossing Maryland, but also the 50 miles of pipeline that was going to be crossing West Virginia, which you can see here in the blue. And the reason why that was important to us is because the Potomac River is a shared resource between the two states. And if there were erosion issues or explosions or blowouts from the drilling process, then that impact would be seen on the Potomac River and would influence Maryland residents and others downstream. And it was important to us for MDE to exercise its authority and to push FERC to do that full environmental assessment. And because as much as what we as the public tried to request FERC to do that full environmental assessment, they denied us. And the state would have a lot better weight to be able to push that action for FERC. And the reason why the Mountaineer Gas wasn't part of the full environmental assessment is because it was an in-state pipeline. It didn't cross state boundaries. And so the pipeline companies were very smart about separating these two different projects. The one project, the TransCanada project in the red, crosses state lines and therefore goes under the federal review process. And because they are connected, we felt that it was necessary that a full environmental assessment be done on both projects. And unfortunately, that did not occur. And so with this pipeline, with this legislation that we're trying to push through, Caitlin will kind of get into the details of it, but essentially if we had that kind of a legislation that forced the Maryland Department of the Environment to do a full 401 certification, they wouldn't have already pre-waived their authority. And we would have been able to, through public process, push the Maryland Department of the Environment to exercise that authority with FERC. And therefore, they would then be able to develop a full environmental assessment that could bring to light all the problems and issues with this particular pipeline. So you can take it away, Kate.
Caitlin, are you on? Zach, do you see Caitlin?
Yes, I do. Caitlin, if you can hear me, can you text in the chat what phone number you're using or send it to me in an email? If you're using your phone for audio, that is.
And while we're waiting for Caitlin, you can read through here. And this is what Caitlin will be describing in more detail of how this bill is going to offer protections that we did not enjoy with the Potomac Pipeline. Zach, I'm going to send you Caitlin's phone number in case it's not working.
She's on the screen and she's on the phone.
All right, go ahead, Caitlin.
All right, awesome. Hey, everyone. So sorry for the technical difficulties there, and sorry for the delay for hopping on. I'm down in the Annapolis legislature right now. Things are fast moving. Was in a few meetings with a few delegates, so sorry again for the delay. So just to go into a little bit more depth around the Pipeline and Water Protection Act. So Ann Haveman from Chesapeake Climate Action Network played a huge role in this as well, but we worked together to draft this legislation to ensure that proposed interstate natural gas pipelines will not negatively impact Maryland's local waterways moving forward. So Brent was completely right. If we had this bill in for the Potomac pipeline process, it would have helped us out a lot more in ensuring a thorough review by MDE. So right now, under the current state of law, MDE is allowed to waive its authority to thoroughly review applications for these interstate natural gas pipeline projects. So the first thing that our bill does is it prevents MDE from waiving that authority and mandates that MDE take a thorough look at each pipeline application. So what that thorough look looks like is it takes a look at the proximity of private drinking water wells to the construction of the pipeline. It looks at downstream water supplies or any water reservoir within 500 feet of the pipeline construction. It looks at drinking water aquifers in close proximity to the construction of pipelines. It looks at any other projects, so cumulative impact, so any other pipeline projects or associated infrastructure that might be coming along with these projects. We want MDE to take that into consideration and take the overall load on that local water body into consideration when they're reviewing these pipeline applications. It will also will require MDE to take a look at impacts from construction activities on upland areas. So these this pretty much means any construction on a steep slope, because then there's more likely to be sediment pollution and runoff from that construction. So that's an important factor for MDE to consider. It also, you've heard a lot about construction through karst terrain and highly erodible soils. So the bill also requires MDE to take a look at that. And then the last two things that MDE will have to look at under our bill is the proximity of construction to sensitive wetlands and streams, but also the impact on water quality from associated greenhouse gas emissions of the pipeline's operation. And then the last thing is that this is already required, but it just is a added requirement around taking a thorough look at grading and sediment and erosion control plans and also stormwater management plans. So all of these just are really in place to ensure that a pipeline is operating as safe as it can be, and it builds in these water quality protections that we currently don't have. So that's the gist of what MDE is required to look at. But the bill also is great in terms of increasing public transparency and notice around these types of interstate pipelines. So for each interstate pipeline, MDE would be required to post public notice of the complete application for that pipeline project on its website, and to the counties affected and to any person that has expressed interest in that pipeline project. And likewise, MDEs, their draft decision to approve a pipeline would also be made available to the public for public comment and for public review and for public hearing. So this really increases our chances of getting, our opinions in the door as to how these pipelines might be affecting local waterways, but also local communities that might be interested in speaking out against these types of projects. So then the last thing that the bill does is allows MDE to collect reasonable application fees. So this we really built in so that MDE would have the wheelhouse and the power and the financial power to actually review these applications in more depth than they have in the past, if they have at all. So MDE will collect a small fee from the pipeline company, and that would be 1% of the gross value of the project, which should not exceed $20,000, and $400 for smaller projects. And MDE really has the authority to determine which one. So the fee should be based on the size of the proposed pipeline and then the estimated cost for MDE's review. So that's really the gist of our 2019 Pipeline Water Protection Act. So if folks have questions, I'm happy to answer them, but I think that this will be a really good bill in getting some good laws and regulations on the books for what MDE has to do in reviewing these types of projects, and can really help advocates and concerned communities fight these types of projects at the same time.
Caitlin, thank you very much. And I understand you need to get back to the legislative session. Would you have time for a few questions we could open up now so that you don't have to wait for the end of the call?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to take questions.
Okay, so if anyone has a question for Caitlin, feel free to type it into the chat or hit the raise hand option and we can call on you to ask your question.
And while we're doing that, I'm going to go back to where we were in the slides.
First question is, does it have a bill number yet?
So the Senate version actually does have a bill number. The House version, we're still collecting co-sponsors on. And if you hold one moment, I will pull up that bill number.
Yeah, it's
Okay,
387, awesome. So it's on this slide. And we'll come back to this slide.
There's actually two-way public hearing for the Senate version of the bill, which is scheduled for February 19th.
The next question is, what does the small fee that MDE collects go towards?
So it would go towards the actual review of the application. So all of those factors I listed, whether it's close to drinking water wells and things like that, it will go towards the staff costs of reviewing those types of projects. So we want it directly to be connected to these pipeline projects.
Any other questions for Caitlin before she has to hop off?
Caitlin, can you give us an update on bill sponsorship and how things are going down there?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got over 25 co-sponsors on the House legislation, and that number is growing every day. Delegate Fraser Hidalgo, he's the one that's sponsoring the House bill, and he is likely going to be dropping the bill, which means it'll make it public and you'll be able to find it on the website, and then it will be assigned a hearing date. He'll be doing that either Wednesday or Thursday this week. Thursday is the actual drop dead deadline for submitting bills and making them public.
Ron, you are unmuted if you'd like to ask your question.
Who would you address?
Ron?
Okay, yeah. On the bill itself, first of all, answer to the bill, does that make the inspection and the regulations retroactive? Because they're already underway, as I understand it. You follow up on that also, though, is does the bill make it harder to make the pipeline and being safer? Does it make it very difficult, or does it actually make it prohibitive to have a pipeline?
Yeah, so those are great questions. The bill would not be retroactive. Constitutionally, we are prohibited from doing that, but we're hoping that this will apply to, you know, for instance, the Eastern Shore pipeline, which has been in the news and things like that, because they still have not applied for the application that this bill would apply to. So we're really trying to capture all of the pipeline projects moving forward, but unfortunately we can't make this retroactively apply to, for instance, the Potomac pipeline. So for your second question, I would say that the bill, it does increase the review around these pipeline projects, so it's going to be harder for pipeline companies to show that they meet all of these different factors that we've outlined under the bill, and will really make clear to MDE whether it's worth, you know, risking our local waterways and public health than the current status quo right now, which we don't have. So I wouldn't say that it makes it prohibitive for pipelines, but it will make it harder for pipeline companies to meet these different standards to show that their projects won't be negatively impacting water quality around the state.
Thank you.
Any other questions before I hop off?
I don't see any others from anyone. Any last questions before Caitlin hops off?
Just want to thank you for taking your time. I know this is a very busy time down there for you and exciting time. So we look forward to hearing about more sponsors. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Bye.
Bye. So Brent, if you can pick back up, what might help people understand, to follow on Ron's last question, is that by deferring to engage in a state-specific 401 water certification, what the state did was to punt the evaluation to the Army Corps of Engineers for a general permit. Maybe if you could explain the difference between those in terms of the level of review.
Yeah, sure. So with these federal projects, the Army Corps of Engineers steps in and has to either utilize what's called a nationwide general permit, or they can have more specific review and have an individual permit. And that is above and beyond what the states would do in their review, and it would also be contiguous with what FERC would be required to do also. And so, you know, what's interesting here is that Maryland Department of the Environment has the ability to motivate the Army Corps of Engineers to do an individual permit and not just a blanket general permit. And unfortunately, with the Potomac pipeline, they failed to do so. They looked at they waived the right to the 401 certification because the Army Corps of Engineers issued a general permit. Now, if this bill was in place, then the state would have done that full 401 certification and would have pushed the Army Corps of Engineers to adopt if there were special BMPs or if there were special concerns, and then that would be adopted through FERC also. Or if the pipeline had extreme issues and extreme problems and pose a severe threat to water quality, you know, then the state would have the ability to virtually deny the 401 certification, much like what New York did a couple of years ago with the pipeline crossing their state. And that's what we want. We want to be able to have the state exercise its authority. And what happened with the Potomac pipeline is they failed to do so.
Thank you, Brent. I'm just going to go through these next few slides because they're up here to give you a sense of what's available for any part of the state. These were done by Sierra Club. If any of you in talking with your legislators want to look at existing pipelines and your proximity to them, this is some information is available. And we put up Cove Point because this is one of the more recent ones, a compressor station on a pipeline to move gas to Cove Point. And this next slide shows the numbers of structures of sensitive nature, hospitals, schools, homes that are within either blast or evacuation zones of the pipeline leading to Cove Point. And what we're going to do next is turn this over to Zach and Ruth Alice to talk about what you can do to help us move support for this pipeline. And hear a variety of things that both of you can talk about.
Ruth Alice, you want me to get started? So the number one thing that we're looking for everyone to do is contact your legislators and ask them directly for their support of this bill. Obviously, this is only going to get passed if we get enough votes in the legislature. And what we need for that to happen is for people to be contacting, emailing, calling their legislator and letting them know that they want to see this bill passed. They need to hear from their constituents constantly about this so they can't ignore it. One easy way for you to do that is to take our action alert, which you could find on our website, sierraclub.org/Maryland, or we will actually be sending that out in the follow-up email to this webinar. So you can find that pretty easily in your inbox in the next day or so. But we, again, want to emphasize, contact your legislators, your delegates, and your senator, and encourage them to support this bill. Ruth Alice, you want to talk about lobby night?
Monday, February 25th. We're looking for people to volunteer to be lobby captains and also just to come out. The captain would get some information ahead of time and help organize the team. There will be a briefing going over the 4 or 5 priority bills. This is that the Sierra Club has. This is one of them. Other priority bills, the Clean Energy Jobs Act, Styrofoam, and others. It's very empowering opportunity to actually meet with your representatives. The Sierra Club sets up appointments, and they look forward to. They're usually a handful of people from each district. So and that's what we aim for. We are particularly looking for people who are in the districts represented on the committees that will be hearing this bill. In the Senate, that's the Environment and Health Committee, EHEA, and in the House, it's Environment and Transportation. And we can send a list of the delegates that are on and senators that are on that committee when we send out the information tomorrow about the webinar. And if your person is on one of these committees, it's particularly important that you contact them, get other people to contact them, because the bill has to get out of committee before it can be voted on. And most, maybe 80% of bills that actually are reported out of committee get a favorable vote on the floor. So the key bottleneck first is to get through the committees and then get to the floor. But every delegate and senator needs to hear about our priority bills. We can also send you a a link to finding out who your delegate is, if or senator is. MDelect.net is one site, and there's another one on the Maryland legislative website. So if you sign up for lobby night, we'll have your address. We'll know who your delegates are, and who represents you. And if you signed up for this call, we should also have your address and know which districts that you're in.
Thank you, Ruth Alice. So folks, you're going to get this information. We could also send you a fact sheet that we have for this bill that gives you background. You will have already gotten more background tonight from this webinar than you would have time to share with your legislator, but it's good to have more of that. And one of the things that we stress is when you meet with them is to try to relate this to why this is important to you, or how you might be personally involved, or in the future might be involved with such a project as one of these pipelines. I think we want to try to turn this over to more questions at this point. And we have plenty of time, folks, and we have some additional slides if you want more information, but let's see where you are now and what we can help you with.
So again, if you have any questions, feel free to either raise your hand or type it in the chat. And it looks like we've got a question from Ron. So Ron, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you.
Okay, thank you. Ron speaking. This is more of a question, information on fracking processes. The wastewater that can be contaminated with diesel materials is one thing. I don't know the karst geology. I don't know if this is a problem with that, but in many cases, many geologies, the wastewater going through the substrates, through the stones, washes out heavy metals. Arsenic is a key toxic pollutant in many fracked water wastewaters. Do you know if the geology is such that Maryland would have that issue also?
Do you want to take that, Brent?
Well, yeah, I mean, with the karst geology, any kind of surface pollution can easily be transmitted into the reservoirs in the karst geology. So, yeah, that's a real concern that we have. Now, we don't really have necessarily fracking in the karst geology within Maryland or in the karst geology that's in the West Virginia Eastern Panhandle. But the drilling process to tunnel under the rivers for the pipeline does use a lot of the same technologies. And diesel engines and the parking of all the vehicles where these, and the staging of this equipment have the potential to leak diesel fuel in karst geologies. And in fact, that's where some pollution problems have occurred in other pipeline projects, is not necessarily from leaking of the pipelines, but it's from the equipment storage and where they're located, and the leaking diesel fuel getting into the ground and through the karst geology and contaminating the groundwater. So yeah, that is a real concern, and I think that is something that's going to be required of MDE to look at, not only within the state of Maryland, but the entirety of the project. And so if this project were another pipeline project were to cross the Potomac, across Maryland and into another state like West Virginia or Virginia, then they should be concerned also about how that state is handling these contamination problems, because we have that shared resource, the Potomac River.
If I could follow up on that, how very informative. I wanted to go more specifically, not what is added to the water that's pumped into the fracking of mines or digging, but the water itself, when it goes through the rock structure, can add additional contaminants. Arsenic is a key one that does show up in fracked water in certain localities. And that's not something that the drillers add, but it's something that comes out.
Right, exactly. And we're also concerned that sometimes the drilling muds that are used to drill these pipeline pathways under rivers also use diesel fuel to kind of thin the mix thin the mud and to, it cools the drill bit, and that's what allows for them to drill through that median. So yeah, there's a definite concern of use of any kind of chemicals in that drilling mud, for these pipelines.
Could someone please answer the questions on the chats about the status of the Potomac pipeline?
Sure. So the status of the Potomac pipeline right now is it's dead in the water. So since the Maryland Board of Public Works has not authorized the easement to cross state property, the Trans-Canada portion, the 3.4 miles of pipeline from Pennsylvania through Maryland and into West Virginia, has been blocked. We are still waiting to hear what Trans-Canada is going to do. They have a couple different options. One is they can attempt to file legal action against the state, or they can potentially reroute the pipeline to avoid state property. The rerouting the pipeline is logistically very, very difficult because they would have to have more property owners sign contracts. They would have to go through the entire permitting process and may have to go through the entire FERC process, environmental assessment, since it would be a new pathway. For the legal side of things, we're not exactly sure what route Trans-Canada could take. They could go through FERC and force FERC to file legal action, or they can file legal action themselves within state court. So we're waiting to hear and see what they're going to do. And the second this is that the National Park Service still has not issued their permit to cross their property, the C&O Canal. We had submitted a lot of information, plus a petition of over 10,000 people requesting that the National Park Service deny that easement access, but they still have not officially come out with a decision.
And Brent, is there
So
any update on the Rockwell plant?
So the Rockwell plant, there's a lot of questions being thrown up in the air. The Rockwell plant is a facility in Jefferson County that is probably one of the main recipients of the gas pipeline. And because the source gas from Trans-Canada has been blocked so far, and Mountaineer Gas has already put in probably 75% of their pipeline, the Rockwell facility is supposed to use gas to fuel their process. And without that gas, that project seems to be dead in the water. However, they seem to be communicating to the Department of Environmental Protection that they will still get gas in some form or fashion. And we're not sure exactly if they're telling the truth, if they're just trying to buy their time until Trans-Canada makes a move. We're just not sure. So they have not really begun construction on the project. However, if the gas is not available for them to use for their processing system, they might have to look for another source of energy. And if they do so, then they'll have to resubmit all their permits, and then we can take more action against the facility.
The Rockwell plant is a very polluting industrial plant in West Virginia, right across the border, that was presumably dependent on the Potomac pipeline being built, and is being very much opposed by West Virginia Sierra Club people and a number of people in that community. There's another question in the chat, Zach, that you may want to address about when lobby night captains will get additional information. I have that question myself, and
Yes, I wrote back to that person privately, but we will be sending emails to folks who sign up as district captains this week, but I will highlight for you now. We have 2 available training dates for people if you're interested. These are for people attending lobby night and for people signing up to be district captains. The first is a webinar on the 11th, and the second is an in-person training date on the 21st, and it's in our College Park office, but we'll be sending that out shortly. And then there's also another question in the chat. Is it not Is it not possible to ban all gas infrastructure by legislation?
I don't know if that's possible or not. I know that it probably wouldn't fly. I mean, it could be you can pretty much do anything through legislation, but I don't think our legislators would really pass any kind of ban on all gas infrastructure.
Interstate gas infrastructure is permitted under FERC, the federal government. And the only way that states can slow down pipelines, the most effective tool they've had so far is a federal review that trumps, to be funny, trumps FERC, which is the Clean Water Act passed in the
Right.
Senate. And that's what we're asking, that the state do a review under the Clean Water Act. And we've been told that when we go to speak to legislators, some of our legislators in the General Assembly are still saying that gas is a bridge fuel. And we are, our public messaging is ask MDE to do the right thing, do their job, and do a 401 review. We're not asking MDE to ban all pipelines, and they really couldn't do that. But we're asking them to use the power that they have right now under a federal law, the Clean Water Act, to do a review and require the many things that Caitlin talked about, including public hearings that will, I think, get a more favorable outcome for us.
There's another question. So is the Potomac pipeline 2/3 built and just the Eastern Panhandle extension through Maryland has been blocked?
So yeah, that's a good question. So the 2/3, yes, 2/3 of the pipeline in West Virginia, which is done by Mountaineer Gas, has been built, has been put in the ground. They have drilled under Sleepy Creek and inserted the pipe. They are still in the process of drilling under Bat Creek. So they have about 2/3 of it done. There is another extension that would run from Martinsburg to the Rockwool facility that has not been fully approved yet. There is actually a public hearing in February 13th on the West Virginia Department of Environmental Protection's permit for that particular pipeline before it's authorized. So 2/3 of it has been put in, just the Trans-Canada Maryland portion has been blocked. So that really begs the question, how are they going to utilize how is Mountaineer Gas going to utilize their pipeline that they've already constructed that goes all the way up to Berkeley Springs in West Virginia, and what they're going to do with that pipeline? Are they going to be able to get gas all the way up there if the source is permanently disconnected through Maryland and from Pennsylvania? So it's a big question. Don't know.
We are concerned about future interstate pipelines. Things that we don't know about that will be covered by this bill, this 401 bill, if passed this year. People mentioned pipelines on the Eastern Shore before, and we know that with Cove Point hoping to ramp up quite a bit, that there may be additional interstate pipelines. So this bill is to cover future projects that may come up.
To follow on what Ruth Alice said, if you've not heard of this, there's a huge proposal that the state of West Virginia, they actually have entered into an agreement with China to build a petrochemical hub in the Ohio Valley. And this would be directly to our border in the west with extensive fracking already going on in Ohio, West Virginia, and Pennsylvania. And the idea is to, rather than having to ship, what they do is they take the liquid hydrocarbons, separate it from the methane, and we'll use that to produce plastics and other things, fertilizers, actually munitions. But in this case, taking ethane and cracking it and producing plastics and plastic pellets that would then be shipped elsewhere. One of the concerns we have is with Cove Point to our east and all this action around us to our north and west and this potential development, Maryland's sitting right in the middle of the path to move all of this gas and hydrocarbon liquids and other products for shipment.
Another question in the chat. Will this bill slow down Cove Point?
This bill won't do anything to existing lines, transmission lines. Cove Point already has transmission lines. They don't have all the compressors they want. They may not have the volume of gas moving there. If they were to propose new, and I think in some ways even enlarged pipelines, if that wasn't part of the original permitting, to go to a different size pipeline, then it's my understanding, and I wish Caitlin were still on here, Brent might know, they would have to submit new proposals.
For interstate, this bill only covers interstate
Right.
pipelines.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, if they were going to resize and put in a new size, a larger size pipeline, or if they'd have to add in compressor stations for that new pipeline, then yes, they'd have to go through the process again.
Any other questions from anyone in chat or raising your hand?
This is Jill. I have a quick question. Is there any reason this bill couldn't cover in-state pipelines?
The Clean Water Act applies to interstate only. It's a federal law.
Right, forgot that detail.
So unlike the pipeline liability bill, which could apply to all, because it's not requiring the state to act on Clean Water Act statute. But this one is tied to the Clean Water Act.
Did you mention the liability bill before?
I didn't. Does anyone want to hear about that? I think I have a slide here.
If we're going to go over a few minutes, I could say a few words about that.
There's the slide. Try to make it bigger.
Are some people willing to stay on for another 5-10 minutes?
Before you jump to that, there's this last question about what we were just discussing. If this bill applies to interstate and FERC regulates interstate, is this an overlap?
The clean,
Go ahead.
well, the Clean Water Act allows, has more power than FERC's decision. So it goes on. New York State was able to stop a pipeline under the Clean Water Act, even though it had FERC approval in more than one case. And Jean, you said that people in the chat, you said that people in New York were trying to get Governor Cuomo to ban infrastructure, I guess you mean gas infrastructure in New York. Other than pipelines, if you could send that information, because I'm only aware of the pipeline issues in New York State. I would be interested to hear about other proposals for other gas infrastructure.
Yeah, just a real quick follow-up on what Ruth had said, that so the FERC requires that the states have, give authorization through the 401 process. And so the states have that ability to stop a pipeline, to issue more measures, more protective measures, more special best management practices or whatever. So they have, the states can exercise their authority. And so it's not necessarily an overlap. It's more of a states' rights, because it is their water resources that could be impacted from this federal project.
And just to follow on one other aspect, the federal administration wants to strip that aspect of the Clean Water Act because they're not happy that some states, and particularly New York, have used their authority to deny what they thought was a project that would be harmful to the state's residents. That would mean a challenge to the Clean Water Act, and that would be a huge constitutional issue. So stay tuned for that, but that I've read that is something that President Trump wants to do.
So if people have to go, Annie, can we share these slides with people? And the webinar itself will be made available in an email that everyone will get.
Definitely. Yeah, I'll send these slides to you, Zach.
We
Great.
can also share a link to the slides. And if you have, thank you everyone for coming. If you have another 5 minutes or so and want to stay on, I'll say a few words about another bill that we didn't expect, didn't know was coming, that is active in the legislature right now. In the Senate, Senator Zirkin, who's the same sponsor for our Pipeline and Water Protection Act, which is going through the environmental committees, has a bill that already had a hearing in the in his Senate Judiciary Committee. It's the Pipeline Strict Liability Bill, SB 100, and it has a corresponding bill in the House, HB 499. The hearing for that one has not been scheduled yet, but that will in the House go through both the House Judiciary Committee and the Environmental and Transportation Committee. So it'll be heard in the same committee that will be hearing, Environmental Committee that will be hearing our Pipeline and Water Protection Act. Senator Zirkin has been pushing strict liability bills on pipelines, fracking, and other things for years. And last year, the legislature, in an overwhelming concern about offshore drilling, actually passed a law defining offshore drilling off the Maryland coast as subject to strict liability. So on the heels of that success, Zirkin has come back with a pipeline strict liability bill. And under strict liability, the injured party doesn't have to prove industry negligence. Obviously, if you're harmed, you can sue. We're a litigious society. And the industry says, well, anybody that's harmed can sue. But if you have to use their industry data to prove that they were negligent, and the burden of proof is on you, it's a very difficult process to win those kind of lawsuits. Under strict liability, the pipeline, the industry would have to prove that it wasn't their fault. And the way they would do that is they would prove that it's someone else's fault. Someone purposely or accidentally damaged a pipeline, or tried to sabotage it. And in that case, they would not be liable. But otherwise, if a pipeline harms people, and it wasn't a third party, that damage the pipeline, the industry would be liable, and the burden of proof would not be on the injured party. His bill is written only to apply to interstate pipelines. So it's an interesting bill. We don't know what kind of traction it will have or if it will get through this year, but it's certainly something that the Sierra Club submitted testimony for. We submitted written testimony for the Senate hearing, and I assume we'll do so for the House. So it's something else to follow.
Any questions for any of us folks? Brent had to get off as well.
Someone is asking, is anyone working on the Green New Deal? There is a page on the National Sierra Club website, I believe, on the Green New Deal. And many of us are very interested in it, interested in the events that will be happening this week. But I don't think that there's a focus in the Maryland chapter on that yet. And Zach may want to say something about that, but if someone is interested in being a focal point, that, you know, that could be, they could volunteer. Many of us are busy working on many other aspects of this, but there is a national sunrise webinar tomorrow night on the Green New Deal. And
At 7 p.m.
at 7 p.m. You can go to the Sunrise Movement website. I think you have to put Sunrise Movement in because otherwise you get some company named Sunrise, and find out about that. Sierra Club, I think, hosted a Green New Deal thing or is hosting. In PG County, Laura Rosenthal is hosting something. I don't know that she's doing it as the Sierra Club. She's also with Greenbelt Climate Action.
Any other questions? We want to thank you for joining us tonight. You'll get a follow-up email with links to the action alert, the fact sheet, and maybe this marylandelect.net that Ruth Alice mentioned. You can reach out to any of us. I think my contact information was on the registration. So please get in touch. Please come out for lobby night. We would love to see you there. It's a lot of fun. And our legislators need to understand why we believe it's important for the state of Maryland to exercise its full authority under the Federal Clean Water Act. So thank you, folks. Anything else, Zach or Ruth Alice, before we say goodbye?
Sign up to join us at lobby night.
Contact your legislators. A call is better than email, and email is better than nothing. Definitely getting in touch however you can.
Thank you so much. Good night, folks.
Night.
Bye-bye.